All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. We're at the top of the hour. And I'd just like to welcome everybody to this month's webinar. And for those that are returning from last month, thanks so much for joining us again. As a quick reminder, we'll be doing these monthly. Last month's webinar, we touched on the store of the future. We collected over 30 million consumer responses about things that they're looking for in the new store experience moving forward. And we shared some of our research. Great webinar. If you're interested, please reach out to the person that reached out to you about this webinar, and they can get you the recording or the slides or any sort of information you're looking for. Gareth, can I just get a quick thumbs up confirmation you can see my slide? It all looks okay? All right, cool. So great to meet everybody. My name is Kelsey Erickson, and I'll be kicking us off today and talking through our agenda and just a quick introduction to TruRating. As I was looking at the attendee list, there's some companies that we recognize, we've worked with or in conversations with, and then others not as much. So I'll be just kicking us off with a quick intro to TruRating, as well as an introduction to Gareth Johns, our Chief Data Officer. And for today's agenda, we have a 15-minute, 20-minute presentation on how our retail partners can increase the average transaction value with your customers through the use of consumer feedback. And so he'll be talking through some of our findings and what we've found over the years. And then towards the end of the meeting, we'll have 5 or 10 minutes dedicated to Q&A. So please, as we go throughout the meeting, I'll be moderating the Q&A section. Make sure if you're submitting questions, you can go ahead and submit them in the Q&A section, but we'll be addressing them towards the end. Okay, so with that, just as a quick introduction to TruRating, I think that this is important just to set the stage so that you kind of know a little bit about who we are, but also what's the underlying solution that helped actually capture this feedback and deliver the insights that we're going to share today. So if you just zoom out to what is TruRating, we've basically got a patented technology that allows us to integrate the feedback experience right into the purchase experience. So you can see in that bottom left chart, we actually can display one of a number of rotating questions right on the payment terminal. In store and then online, we can do that right after the payment confirmation page. And because it's really easy for consumers to feedback, we get the highest response rates in the industry. So in store, we average 80% response rates. And then online, we average just over 50% response rates. But I think the really important part, especially as it relates to today's presentation, is that with every piece of feedback, we connect that with over 50 data points surrounding the transaction. It's because we've got that integration with the payment software. So we know how much customers are spending. We know what items they're buying, how many items they're buying. We actually hash their credit card and assign an anonymous token to that consumer so we can track them over time. And what that's been able to provide us is a really rich understanding into who these consumers are and what's driving their spending decisions. And so how we work with companies is we deliver these insights to companies in the form of dashboards, reports, and then actually our data insights team that Gareth leads will conduct more in-depth analysis and align on strategic business decisions and things like that. But in addition to that, every time a consumer rates with TruRating, those ratings actually get integrated into Google. We can talk about that in more detail later. But also when a consumer rates, TruRating donates to one of many children's charities. And so there's a number of built-in incentives that basically allow these consumers to continue to rate with us over time. So that's a little bit about TruRating. Just to introduce Gareth. So Gareth Johns is our Chief Data Officer. And if you just zoom out and look at his career, he has over 20 years of experience leading research teams. Where he started his efforts was actually in Dunnhumby over in the UK. He's based in the UK, joining us a little bit later in the day. So thanks, Gareth. But yeah, led a number of different projects and teams, and then actually came over to be part of the foundational team of Dunnhumby USA. You might recognize them, you might not, but they were essentially acquired by Kroger, and Dunnhumby USA is now what we know as 8451. So he's been doing a lot of this type of research for quite some time now. And where he just provides a wide range of expertise is around overarching program design, question strategy, methodology, in-depth analytics, product development, program management, and client consulting. And so today, he and his team play a really important role in advising our clients on how they can align a program design with their strategic business objectives. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the reins over to Gareth, and he's going to be talking through some of what we found around how to increase ATV with consumer feedback.
Cool. Thank you very much. It's good to move on slides and not have that picture of myself in high definition staring back at me. So today we are going to be talking about how to increase what we call here ATV, or spend per visit, or spend in the moment, and specifically with the feedback that we're getting from customers. And so we work with lots of different retailers, as Kelsey mentioned, and those are at the moment across North America, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and they cover most of the sectors of retail that we'd want. We're very big, I guess, in clothing and fashion and speciality, but we've also got clients in convenience, discount, grocery, home furnishings, and probably drugstore, pharmacy as well. So it's a wide base, it's growing. And what we're going to talk about today is the thing that all of them are worried about, right? Which is how am I going to grow my same store sales? And specifically, how am I going to do that by growing spend in the moment? So rather than talking about, isn't about this month's webinar, at least, is not about how do you get people to come back more often, or how do you get those customers to make more purchases, but more when they're in the store, how do you maximize the spend that they have in that visit? So if you go on to the next slide, Kelsey. Yeah, but there's the really, there's definitely other issues that are at play here, and those are things about making sure you've got the right product and category mix, about getting the price right. But what we're really talking about today is the things that you can do in store. So what is it that a retail ops director can focus on? What is it that a store manager can do, even right down to what is it that staff can do differently? And looking over the last couple of years at the work that we've done with lots of those retailers, they sort of fell into three main areas, which is what we're going to talk through. The first being the store experience. So, we all know that the role of the store has been changing over the last couple of years. When the pandemic hit, it obviously accelerated and changed more quickly as more and more people, I guess, went across to digital. But yes, that role of that store, and how does the experience in that store impact ATV? Then the second area will be about staff behavior. So what is it that staff can do in each and every transaction or interaction that makes it more likely that those customers are going to spend more? And then linked to that behavior, I think, is something around the members of staff as well, in terms of the types of staff that get hired, and also the training that they're given, as a way of making them more able to help customers and encourage them to spend more. So those are kind of the three areas that we're going to focus on. So if we go to store experience first. So these are examples of how you increase spend for a business, really, where the amount spent is really a function of how many items are in the basket. So if you think of a lot of businesses, they'll have, some businesses will be able to get people to spend more by getting them to trade up within a category. For this example here, we were working with a discount retailer where, for the most part, all products were roughly the same price, and they were all fairly low ticket items. So their real way to grow spend in the moment is to get those customers to spend by buying more items. And what they found was actually there was a direct correlation between the number of items that somebody was putting in their basket, and in this case, how comfortable they felt in the store. So this was done at the height of the pandemic. It was just as everybody in the US was coming back into stores. And they were focused very much on, do customers feel safe in our store, and do they feel safe enough to browse the store and spend time in the store? And while these numbers all look pretty good, right, at a very high level, they're amazing to have 97% of people feeling safe. Actually, below that, there was quite a lot of variation by store. And what we found was that those stores that weren't giving that sort of safe and inviting place to spend time were seeing much fewer items per basket. and that was having an impact, a direct impact on ATV. So the concept of how do you make the store as inviting a place to spend time? Now, obviously, there's a safety element. Yes, it feels safe in here. And I guess the more we go on, the less that becomes an issue. But also, how does it feel like an enjoyable place to spend time? And I think as we see more and more of kind of, I guess, retail as theatre and other reasons to be in the store rather than just to purchase, they're all efforts to effectively, how do I get you to stay here longer and to browse more and more of the store to pick up more items? So that role of the store, the physical store as a place to spend time to increase basket size has been an important one for us. But then I think if you go on to the next slide, Kelsey, the converse of that we've seen at the same time is the increase in the role of digital as a way of streamlining that experience. So this is an example of a nutrition brand that we work with down in Australia, who spent an awful lot of time on their website trying to make it a real place where you could go and you could learn as much as you wanted about products. And so they used they didn't see digital as just another channel from which to purchase. They saw it as a real place to try and give as much information as possible. But what that meant was that more and more customers who were coming into the store actually knew exactly what they wanted to purchase before they came in. And that store experience, although it wasn't a straightforward kind of buy online, pick up in store, they were almost pushing it that way, that more and more customers knew what they were coming in for. They came in, picked the item off the shelf, went straight to the till, paid for that item, walked out the door. And again, they saw that average basket size decrease because the staff were almost losing that opportunity to engage customers in conversation, to ask them about their needs, to encourage those additional visits. So I think, in this case, it was a watch out of, it's great that you've made the digital environment a place for knowledge and sharing information, but you've sort of lost the ability to maybe suggest some additional products to encourage that basket size up. And I think that's a lesson that, as we see more and more stores go for sort of frictionless payment and more of a self-serve environment, and the benefits that can give in terms of redeploying staff, that's great as long as that redeployment comes in a way that enables you to engage customers still and to sort of capture those additional items. And when that doesn't happen, I think this is what you start to see, is that average basket size can decrease as a result. So those are just sort of two, I guess, sides of the coin of how do you think about the store and how do you make sure that that store is an engaging place to be. And while, yes, you don't want an inefficient buying process, the more you streamline that process, kind of the more you have to watch out for the fact that your kind of basket size is going to decrease, and those single visits, single item visits are going to go up as well. So that's two on sort of the store experience. The next one that we're going to look at is actually about staff behavior. And this example is for a business that was looking to get people to trade up within a certain category. So they are a fairly high-end shoe store. The number of people that put multiple items in the basket is pretty low. You go to buy shoes, you normally only need one pair and you buy one pair at a time. So their real opportunity to increase that ATV was about helping customers to feel comfortable to trade up to a more expensive item. And they explored or kind of experimented with 3 different ways of getting those customers to feel comfortable to trade up. And it was all about, what does staff do? Did we manage to get you on a first name terms, was effectively what question 1 was getting at. Did we focus on selling the benefits of the product rather than the features of the product? And then thirdly, did we actually make recommendations, and do we give you a choice? Do we give 1 or more recommendations? So we asked those questions across the way, and if you click through, Kelsey, it will show you that, 1 more. The ATV impact of those things was very high in all cases. So the role of staff here in helping to grow those sales by getting people to trade up to more expensive items really was about the things that they did and the way that they engaged with the customers. Now, for this particular retailer, they landed on, actually, we need to get to a point where the conversation with the customer is engaging enough that we get on first term basis, and we need to focus on that, making recommendations. And if we can do those 2 things well, then we will see kind of, sales of the more top end products increase. I think what's interesting here also is they went for a very prescriptive approach, right? So they tell their staff, this is what you need to do. You need to get on first name basis with this customer, and you need to make recommendations. And those are the two approaches that we go for, and those are the two things that we measure you on. And you know you're being measured on it, and we've shown you that actually it has an impact. And actually, I think it's that showing people that it has an impact that's really helped them to drive that compliance. What we've seen with some of our other merchants is they are less prescriptive about that, and they'll go for more. Have you listened to customers' needs? Have you made some recommendations? But they'll be less prescriptive on you have to do it in this way. And I think there's a balance between those two things. If you go prescriptive, it's much easier to measure compliance, but potentially it can feel slightly less authentic. And so there's a level of how much can you trust your staff and which way do you want to go there. But in general, for this one, it was about how do you increase that ATV by getting customers to trade up. The next one I think is for businesses where it's less about trading up within to a more expensive item, but how to grow the number of items within that basket. So how do you encourage customers to put that second item into the basket? And I think we've seen different ways of doing this. And actually what we've seen is that if the customers felt that they were getting relevant and helpful recommendations, they were much more likely to put that second item in than if they weren't. And I think, how do you get to the point where you can make a relevant and helpful recommendation? You have to have listened to your customer, and you have to have gotten to a point where they trust you. So again, it's the same approaches that help you to grow or make a customer feel more comfortable to trade up to a more expensive item are often the same approaches that can get them to feel comfortable to take that second item, and actually can give the staff the knowledge of this is when to offer the product and this is what product to offer. We have another merchant where actually that second item is almost always the same item. So, it's more of a, I'm not asking whether you need something else more, I'm pushing the piece of stock that I need to shift. And on that basis, we see only about 4% of customers actually take that item. So I think, if you want to grow the basket size as a whole and you want to use staff to do that, then you have to give staff, one, the flexibility to have multiple items that they can offer, and two, they have to be trained in a way to actually be able to ask the questions to make the right recommendation. So that sort of brings us on nicely to the, what is it about staff that gives them the credibility, I guess, to do that. So I don't think it's just about the behaviors you ask them to adopt. I think it can also be about the knowledge that those staff have. So this example is for one of our businesses that for the most part was selling items that were a fairly straightforward sale in categories that everybody would purchase from, very self-serve ability to do in those categories. And they expanded it into a much more kind of tech-focused range. So by adding that category, they kept the same level of staff training and they kept the same service model going forward. But what they found was actually that when customers were moving into that new department, and it was a more considered sale, it was a slightly higher ticket price, and it was a slightly more complex sale, and you needed to make sure you got the right piece of tech that fits with everything else that you needed it to do. Actually, staff needed to have more training and needed to be more knowledgeable if they were to be able to deliver this level of service that customers were expecting, because customers were actually increasing their expectations of what they expected in that department, and it probably wasn't being met by the same model. So I think this is an example of, the same approach, or the approach that fits in one category is not necessarily going to be the approach that fits in another category. And in this particular case, for those stores that had a much lower level of service expectation being met for that tech department, they also saw a corresponding much lower level of sales. So it was about making sure that they saw that there were certain departments where they were going to have to train staff up more, they were going to have to make staff more available, and they were going to have to talk to staff about different ways of engaging customers in one department than potentially in another. And then I think the final one is also, this I guess is less of a training one and more of a credibility point. We've seen this both for in this case, this is a high-end fashion retailer selling women's fashion. We've seen the same thing in footwear with like trainers as well, that actually customers are judging staff on their levels of knowledge, on their passion for the product, you know, on whether or not they're listening to you. And all those things basically come down to staff credibility when they're making recommendations. And in this case, we work with the merchant to ask lots of different questions around how they were helping out, and depending on how they were helping out, what kind of impact that was having on spend. So were there certain things that mattered most if you were trying to get people to buy at the more expensive end of the range? And what we found here was that actually of those 3 questions you can see there, from just a general helping you shop today to recommending an outfit to offering advice on size and fit, it was definitely the offering advice on size and fit, that sort of validation step right before making the final point to purchase, that was the most important point for them. And we've seen that for different stores where they've had slightly different hiring practices in place, how good this can be, or how can really vary. So if you hire based on passion, if you hire based on, I guess, knowledge of the product or the brand, if you get people that have high levels of credibility and confidence, then you can see much better impact than if you hire just for general retail knowledge. And so for the footwear retailer in this case, they had different hiring practices in different stores at different times. And what they found was that in the store where they hired purely just on have you generic retail knowledge, actually they were seeing it was much harder to get people to buy at the more expensive side of the range. Whereas when they hired much more on passion and knowledge, rather than maybe retail experience as a general point, then they were able to see a much higher level of those up at the top end sales. So yeah, that's just I guess a whistle-stop tour of some of the things that we've seen working with staff, working with our merchants, really around, I guess, store experience, what you can ask staff to do in the moment, but also how you can equip staff to be in their best place to do that work as well.
Thanks so much, Gareth. Short and sweet, just like we like it and are trying to keep. We hope it was, we hope it was helpful. Just 3 actionable things that everyone can take away to their stores and their teams. We'll now open it up for any sort of questions. If you want to use that Q&A feature, please feel free to chat those in. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so I can moderate and see some of the questions that have kind of come in here. All right, so first one, pull this up real quick. Okay, Gareth, maybe I'll push this one to you. My brand is not sold in a high touch or luxury environment where CX isn't as much of an emphasis. How do I apply these learnings to my business?
So I'd say, one of our clients is a convenience retailer. They work very much on a sort of a very efficient model where they try and keep the members of staff in any one store down to a single person at most of the time. So for them, obviously, the ability to have somebody greeting customers at the door or spending time with an individual was more difficult. But even they saw that actually, if they encouraged the member of staff to just do some basic things while they were going about the other tasks that they already had to do, so acknowledging customers when they came in, that kind of, even like a quick smile to make them feel welcome, that had some impact on the size of the baskets that were coming out of those stores. So yeah, I don't think you can say that every single business can go to a model of, you know, having a 5-minute conversation with staff, with customers about things, but you can just, you know, customers are pretty simple in what they want sometimes. Even just feeling welcome and feeling that they're sort of a friendly person in the store if they need them can actually start to have an impact. So reminding staff to do that can be important. And I think giving them the evidence of what happens when they do that is the way to sort of win the hearts and minds there.
Awesome. Thanks, Gareth. The other one that was submitted here has to do more with, I think, just a really common challenge in the industry around staffing shortages. So I think if I'm paraphrasing this question right, I've basically I have massive staffing shortages and I can barely keep my stores staffed. Like, how can I leverage some of these learnings in that type of an environment with very limited staff?
I think in a way this is sort of similar to the one before. You know, like if you're down at the point where you don't have very many members of staff, if you're having to hire brand new people all the time, then you probably have to adopt more of a tell rather than sort of leave them to their own devices point of view. So, you know, saw this a lot kind of in the, I guess, Q4 of last year, where, you know, people coming back from being lockdowns, a lot of the staff had moved on. It was getting much harder to find people to take those roles. And in those cases, I think you do have to be a bit more prescriptive on these other things that we know that matter, and this is how we want you to adopt them, and this is the approach. And then I think, you know, as you start to bring staff up and train them up and hopefully keep them for longer, then you can adopt more of a, this is the general outcome we want you to adopt, and this is what we want from you. But yeah, I think for some of those stores where actually staffing and just recruitment is becoming a big issue, ideally you would recruit for passion rather than maybe just for general experience. But if you just have to recruit where you can recruit, then I think being more prescriptive is probably the way forward that we're seeing.
Cool. The other one I think kind of dovetails nicely with the point you were making about like selling across different departments and how there might be different processes involved. But I guess the overarching question here is, how do I get customers to shop more of the store? So instead of just in one area, how do I get them to shop in more of the store across departments in order to increase my ATV?
Yeah, so I think actually we've seen, I think there's two main points to here. One, I think, which is what we showed in that slide, is you can't expect customers to have the same expectations in different departments for different sort of buying journeys. So you have to think at a category level in terms of what is the customer need here and what is their expectation, and then how do I meet that? So I think that's more of a general service point. I think the one about how do you get people to shop more of the store or to shop across category, not that we've got the slide up here, but I think we might have shown it in the last webinar, is actually that idea of how you merchandise the store can have a big impact on that, in terms of, you know, if you do split everything and you have your departments very clearly structured in different ways, that can sometimes make it harder for people to shop multiple parts of the store, and actually mixing that up a bit can have an ability to think, for customers to think, these things go well together, I can buy more here. So we have done tests of that where we've taken a store, and as they're planning to do a kind of a re-merchandising or re-looking at the way that you experience that store through the merchandise, looked at both how customers perceive the product range, but also how many items they put in their basket. And that perception of product range can really be influenced by how you merchandise the store.
Awesome. All right, the last question, and if there's any other ones, please chat them in. But last question I see is one that I always like to hear. But if I wanted to integrate TruRating into my business, like how hard is it to get you guys deployed?
Do you want to take that? I mean, generally, I'd say in most places we're enabled with the majority of payment partners now. So I think from a technical point of view, it's pretty straightforward and pretty quick. I guess you would say one quick flick, switch.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is, like, where we're a bit different than some of the other customer feedback solutions is that we've actually already built our application on the payment software that your company's already using. So it's not an IT integration project. It's not an IT resource heavy thing. We're a feature like Apple Pay is for an in-store proposition. And then online, it's a copy and paste of a script of code. So it's pretty easy to deploy. It's not a heavy lift for your team. It's more a matter of just, getting the feature enabled and turned on. But of course, follow up with the person that invited you to this meeting for any sort of incremental details on that. All right. I see we're at time and I'm not seeing any other questions come through. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks everyone so much for taking the time out of your morning, and give us feedback if there's anything that you want to see on future topics or ways we can make these webinars more useful. Everyone have an awesome day. Thanks.